What separates leaders who earn loyalty from those who simply demand compliance? Today's guest has spent over 3 decades inside the federal government answering exactly that question, from frontline manager all the way to chief of staff. He now pours that hard-won insight into leaders across government, corporate America, nonprofits, and beyond. I'm Tom DeBell, and this is Lead with More, where we explore character-driven leadership for today's leaders. My guest today is Kevin Wayne Johnson, founder and CEO of the Johnson Leadership Group, certified international coach, speaker, trainer, and best-selling author of the Leadership with a Servant's Heart series. If you've ever wondered how to lead people, not just manage them, this conversation is for you. So let's jump in. Welcome to Lead with More, the podcast about character-driven leadership for today's leaders. I'm excited about today's podcast because I'm joined today by a very special guest, Kevin Wayne Johnson, who is the founder and CEO of the Johnson Leadership Group. He's also a certified international coach, speaker, and trainer, and best-selling author. It's a lot to unpack, but we're going to touch on all of it. Kevin, welcome to Lead with More.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate the invitation. It's an absolute joy to be here with you.
Yeah. Well, before we get into our conversation, I'd like for you to maybe introduce yourself a little bit to our audience and tell us a little bit about where you've been, what you've been doing up to this point.
All right. Well, I'm a native of Richmond, Virginia, and attended the Richmond Public Schools, and after graduating from high school, went across the street to Virginia Commonwealth University, where I earned my business degree. And 1 year after graduating from VCU, I entered into the federal government without realizing that I would be there for 34 years. So I made a career out of it as a frontline, mid-level, and senior level leader. Had a wonderful opportunity to work in a lot of different jobs, traveled the world, and met some phenomenal people across the board. And it was really inspirational and motivating for me once I retired, that was 7 years ago, to step into the place and space where I am now, where I spend 99% of my waking hours pouring into aspiring as well as current leaders in government, in corporations, in churches, in nonprofits, and in academic institutions. And along that way, I met a nice young lady, and we dated and fell in love and got married. And from our union, we raised 3 sons. And they're all young men now, but still kind of discovering what life is all about. And it's been a great journey. So I'm in year number 8 of leading my company now, and I believe we've only scratched the surface.
One of the things that really piqued my interest, because it's a similar pursuit that I have, in that you really are looking to help, I think the way you put it in some of your literature is to coax audiences to live out their gifts and awaken their potential, which is really a pursuit that people should pursue early in life, but typically don't get to this stage until they reach the second season or the second mountain, however you want to put it. How early did that come alive in you, that you knew you needed to pursue your gifts, awaken the potential, and really pursue this servant leadership idea?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom. For me, it started in the home, because the one thing I didn't mention in the intro is that I'm the son of a U.S. Marine. And Dad kept me focused. He always used 2 words as a way of keeping me inspired. And he would always say, be prepared. Now, I'll be honest with you, Tom, as a little boy and as a teenager and even as a young adult, I wasn't quite sure what he meant. He just said, be prepared. So in part, that's why I made sure that I finished college. And in part, that's why I entered into the federal government, because it was a wonderful opportunity. But I found out later, probably around 28, 29 years old, I really discovered after about 6 years into my career what Dad meant. And what he was saying was, it's always better to be prepared and not have an opportunity than it is to have an opportunity and not be prepared. He didn't say it that way, but that's what he meant. And when I grabbed a hold of it, I was grateful that he deposited those seeds when I was young, so that when I became older, I could start to see now the fruit of what he had planted in me. And so it started at home, and that's where it usually starts. But many of us are late bloomers, and that's okay, as long as we ultimately discover our strengths and our gifts and what we're really, really good at, and we use it for the betterment of mankind. Now we're on a great path to make the world a much better place.
That really captures it right there. That one statement. We could end. We're not going to end there, but that encapsulates everything about what I've come to realize as well. And one of the things that really piqued my interest was the fact, with you having such an extensive career in public at the federal level, and no less. My public life was at the local level, but there's a lot of similarities. It gets a lot more intense when you get to the federal level, because this idea about leadership in service of others for the betterment of mankind is, I think, at the core of the ideology of what service in government is. But so many times people are diverted from that. And so there's a real challenge in living that out. And I wanted to ask you about that type of challenge, because I'm certain that you've seen that, especially at the levels of leadership that you operated in the federal government, this lure to move away from the more altruistic leadership to self-serving leadership.
Yeah, well, what really helped me, Tom, is as a federal government employee, depending on what department and what agency you're working in, and depending on your work role, will expose you to a great deal, and you learn how to work your way through complex, complicated, and challenging situations. So here's why and how it worked for me. I grew up in a military home. As a child, we moved around quite a bit. I was born in Quantico, Virginia, a Marine Corps base. Dad was a drill sergeant in Parris Island, South Carolina. I remember when I was a little boy, before kindergarten, him coming home with that big green hat. And my brother was born in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, another military base. And so we moved around a lot, which did what? Exposed me to a lot of different people, a lot of different cultures, and a lot of different situations, and to get accustomed to what it means to be adaptable and flexible and resilient, because we're constantly moving. Interestingly enough, when I moved into my government career as a very, very early frontline leader, I was exposed to military, civilian, and contractors. I worked in 3 different cultures all at the same time, learning how to flex and adapt and be resilient, because each culture brings its own unique way of operating. Military is strictly chain of command. So the sergeant is going to follow the orders of the lieutenant. It doesn't have to make sense. It's just chain of command. That's the military culture. In the civilian culture, we all have opinions, right? We're constantly thinking, oh, we should do it this way. Why'd you do it that way? That doesn't make any sense. And then the contractor culture is much more subservient. And what I mean by that is contractors are employed by the companies that are contracted by the federal government to render a service or deliver a product. So contractors pretty much show up representing that company under contract to follow the guidelines and the directives that they're given. And so learning how to maneuver through and around and in each of these different cultures really motivated me and really molded me to be an effective leader and really understand the different leadership styles in terms of how people respond. People don't respond very well to bad leadership because it sends a bad message. It sends the message that they're not important. What they're doing doesn't really matter. And I don't want to hear your opinion because I have all the answers. Good leadership, though, helps people to blossom and taps into people's potential and sends a message that they're very important. I really do care that you showed up today. And I would watch that year after year after year, going back and forth between these three cultures. And that's what I'm focused on today, helping leaders, but also those that are following the leaders, understand strategies and principles that work and strategies and principles that don't work, because we're dealing with human behavior and people have basic needs. And if they're not being met, they're either going to go into their shell or they're going to leave. And we don't want either one to happen.
So when we're talking about servant leadership, and you talk about these qualities of servant leadership of how it presents itself, how do you modify that when you're talking across those three different types of cultures: the military, the governmental, the civilian, the contractor? That's four. But there's a place for it, but it presents somewhat differently. Mm-hmm. Or is there enough commonality that it's almost the same message?
Yeah, there is commonality, but we have to also recognize the difference and the differentiators, if you would, when it comes to that. So the conversations that I've had in the past with our general officers and our flag officers in the military, so that would be your brigadier generals, your major generals, your lieutenant generals, and even your 4-stars, is I would present the information to them in a manner that's understandable and relatable and applicable, short, sweet, to the point, bottom line up front. That's what they want, and it has to be delivered that way. And I let them know that I'm in the process of coaching and mentoring and training the staff to do the same. Because when it's all said and done, they're looking for the desired outcome and not necessarily how, but the what. On the civilian side and on the contractor side, it's a little bit easier because showing some compassion and empathy is showing that we're human. And that's what people are looking for in their leader. Not so much on the military side, because of their training, and lives are potentially at risk and decisions have to be made quickly. That's one way. But with civilians and contractors, being able to show some vulnerability and just being genuine and authentic goes a long way to motivating those two audiences to do their best and to be their best. So it's just really a matter of focusing on human behavior, but how you go about delivering it and being effective and efficient, because the audiences are different. That made all the difference in the world in terms of being able to get things done and to be compliant with what you're being asked to do. You know, one of my last positions prior to retirement was chief of staff. And I had a direct line to a active duty Major General United States Air Force who was the chief of staff. I was the command secretariat at the U.S. Cyber Command. And then from there, I went on to become a chief of staff in a different organization, just kind of following the model of this Major General. But I also had a dotted line to a 3-star Marine who was really, really tough, really, really tough.
Yeah.
But I was able to have good communications with him over time, because eventually I was able to get him in a place, in a space where I could let him know, sir, my dad is a U.S. Marine. And that changed the whole conversation. And so it's just a matter of really understanding people that you're around, what makes them tick. How can we develop a working relationship that will be mutually beneficial while at the same time getting the work done. And it's not easy, but it's definitely doable.
Well, and it sounds like it falls into this category of effective communication, because the good leader has to know what's the most effective way to communicate with the various types of people that they're going to be trying to lead or communicate with or serve under. And so that's a topic that I spend a lot of time trying to get across, is that you have to know who you're talking to and what's going to be received. So is that the same concept you use? You talked about the fact that you work with government, you work with corporations, you work with nonprofits, churches, academia. Is that a similar idea about how you have to adapt these ideas of what servant leadership looks like?
Yeah, I believe so, Tom, because I mentioned those 5 venues because that's where people are in the marketplace. And while they may have a different mission and vision in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, you're still dealing with people. You're dealing with people who have basic needs and basic expectations of their leaders. And my message is simple, but it's not always very, very easy to implement and execute. The message is just recognize and acknowledge the people that you're leading, get to know them, allow them to get to know you, develop the working relationships, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at how you'll get things accomplished. So instead of mandating and dictating and threatening, you can move to a posture of asking, and you'll be surprised at how far people will go because they love working for you. Well, why do they love working for you? Because you have demonstrated that you're there to help. You are ushering in some hope, and you're letting them know that you will gladly provide resources and share information to help them. One day, when they get to that next level of responsibility, they'll be prepared and ready to go because of you. And that's the heart and soul of leadership with a servant's heart. What we're doing is we're combining what's here in the mind. That's our subject matter expertise. So when we show up as a leader, people expect us to be subject matter experts. That's how we get our credibility. But what people are hoping for, and they don't know quite yet, what they're hoping for is that you offer an element of respect, and that you value and you honor and care for the people that you're leading. And you even demonstrate some compassion and empathy when needed. There are a lot of young parents with young children, and daycare is tough. There are some workers and other people on your team who are maybe in their 50s and 60s, and they're taking care of elderly parents. There's some people on your team that have a 90-minute commute from home to the office. And if we can demonstrate that we give a care about the challenges that are on their plate, it will go a very, very long way, as opposed to always demanding performance and demanding productivity. That's what leadership with a servant's heart is all about, and that's what we teach.
And you've put a lot of this information. I do want to specifically call out, among the books that you've written, there's a series of books about servant leadership. It's called Leadership with a Servant's Heart. I've got at least 3 of them downloaded that I've gone through, and it's a lot of this information you're talking about. And I do want to call attention to it because I want people to be able to go and find this information. This idea of building servant leaders, once again, it's the whole foundation of why I decided I needed to do this, because I saw a gap in that where people didn't understand it. And you've taken that to the next level, maybe a lot more levels of actually going to the point of taking it into all these different organizations, these different types of organizations, all around the world. And so
Yeah, it's been a great ride. I'm really, really grateful for all the doors that have been opened. We're on our way in just a few weeks now, going down to the Bahamas and having some meetings there at the U.S. Embassy to roll out some leadership development training across that nation. They just had their national elections, and I'm looking forward to that conversation and potentially working with them as well. So it's been a wonderful ride, and I'm just a firm believer, Tom, that the more time we spend on earth pouring into others. Now, of course, we have to take care of ourselves as well. I'm not saying neglect yourself, but taking some time to pour into others is where the true blessings and the true treasures lie. Because people need help. People need some hope. They need some encouragement. They need to hear some positive words. They just need to know somebody cares about them and for them and will listen to them. Now, again, I know it sounds simple, but it's challenging for us to implement and execute because many of us haven't been taught. So I never come from the standpoint that you're doing this wrong. I never come from that standpoint. But it's all about education, and it's about heightening the level of awareness around what works. And what really works is helping people to cultivate their skills and their talents and their abilities, while at the same time letting them know that as a leader, I'm here to help. Ask questions anytime. There is no dumb question. And I really, really care that you're part of my team. We couldn't do it without you. And it goes a long way to how people respond and react. It really does.
I wanted to ask you about this idea of ongoing growth, because that's a concept. It's I know you're a Maxwell team member, and that's big in those teaching about personal growth never stops, leadership growth never stops. And so many people think that they can bring somebody in to do some training, get some kind of read a book, do something, and then they're okay. That's it.
Right.
And I find a lot of resistance to this idea of no, this is ongoing, and it does help if you can get somebody from the outside to help coach you through this continually. I was wondering if you run into that same level of, it's not resistance, but it's just that people don't understand that that's really an important thing.
It's very important. Ongoing, consistent, recurring opportunities to learn something new is invaluable. The challenge that organizations have is that when they don't implement that, and many don't, after the training session, the workshop, the seminar, the retreat, many of the leaders go right back to the same old practices.
Absolutely.
Because
Wow.
there was no call to action. There's nothing in place to now do in terms of implementation of what you've learned. So we always incorporate assessments, different types of assessments. So each leader understands their strengths and areas of development, comes with a very comprehensive, robust report that we walk them through. And then we also offer executive coaching. So coaching is part of the follow-up, so we can have a really now one-on-one conversation around what was learned, what's working, what's not working, with a roadmap and with an action plan to hold them accountable. If organizations don't do that, then it is highly likely that the leaders will revert right back to the same old leadership approach that they took prior to the class. And that's something that we emphasize because, listen, we're creatures of habit. We're all creatures of habit.
Yeah.
And it takes time to break that habit.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways that I believe when it comes to these workshops and seminars and other training that we do is to have a call to action and a measurable follow-up plan. And it includes a little bit of everything I just said. There are the assessments, there's the coaching, et cetera, so that people can now start to really get it. it may take 9 months for them to get it. That's okay, as long as they get there. But if we don't do anything, then it's just going to go in one ear out the other, and they're going to go right back to who they were.
Yeah, in 8 or 9 months, and sometimes is actually an optimistic time frame. I know that it took me several years of hearing the benefits of having a coach before I actually hired one when I was back in the other season.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it takes a while. You mentioned the A word, accountability. That one's huge because I think it's at the core of what good coaching and good follow-up is about. And what I've seen in some of the organizations I've talked to is that they all want it. They say they want it. But what they really want is somebody else to be held accountable. It's not about whether you're being held accountable. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's a creature of habit, and the thing that people always forget is that when we do this, there's three
Yeah.
more pointing back at us. And
Yeah.
and why is that, Tom? Because we all have blind spots.
Yeah.
None of us see ourselves the way other people see us.
Yeah.
And that's why feedback is incredibly important. And that's why accountability is important. If you're a leader and you're not holding people accountable, you're doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
And I realize that people sometimes don't want to hear it. I understand that some people are thin-skinned, they get offended, but you have to deliver it in a manner in which it helps them to improve. Not put them down, but helping them to improve. So really needs to be a two-way conversation, just like feedback. It needs to be a two-way conversation because both words, for most people, have a negative connotation.
Yeah.
If I mention anything about accountability or feedback, the initial thought is, oh, what did I do wrong? And we want to change that paradigm and get leaders to present the feedback and the accountability in a manner in which it's all about helping them to improve with their people. That has to be taught, Tom, like being a good listener. That has to be taught. It's not a skill that we have innately because we don't get any training in school. We find out about how to be a better listener once we get into the workplace, and we don't have very many courses and seminars and workshops where we have an opportunity to really understand what it means to be a good listener. So that's a whole different conversation, but it's all part of, like you mentioned, the communication piece, which is connected to the leadership with the servant's heart piece as well.
Boy, you really said a mouthful there, and we don't have the time to go into that now, but it is something that I'm hoping that anybody that's hearing this is hearing what we're saying and really receiving it. That not just hearing it and saying, yeah, that sounds right, but really, I hope it's triggering something because the types of services and that you offer through the Johnson Leadership Group, so critical to building effective leadership. And if that's the case, if people are hearing this and they're saying, I really like this, I need to find out more, where should we send them? How should we get them in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. The website is the same as the name of the company. The name of the company is the Johnson Leadership Group, and so the website is www.thejohnsonleadershipgroup.com. Email address is kevin@thejohnsonleadershipgroup.com, and all of our information is there in terms of the different services that we provide. If you go to the contact page, there's even an opportunity for anyone who may be interested for a complimentary coaching session, just to kind of give you an idea of how that works. You'll see a list of all the different clients that we work with. In our 8 year, well, we just turned 8 years back in March. We have had the fortunate opportunity to pour into 71 different organizations around the world, and we're looking forward to potentially adding the Bahamas when I go down there next month as well. And like I said, I think we're just scratching the surface. We're just kind of getting into this, and
Yeah.
I'm super excited about what's to come.
Yeah, the need is definitely there, and the need is great. So, and I appreciate all that you're doing. A wealth of information, much more than we can get into in a 30-minute podcast. But I do want to encourage listeners. I'll have information in the show notes about how to contact you, and I want people to do that because they need to find out what you're all about. We're about out of time. I'd like to ask you, though, what would you like to leave the listeners with as a final thought?
Here's my final thought, and it aligns with the theme of the company. Our theme is know better, do better, lead better. And here's what I mean by that. I want all of us to continue to have a thirst that will not quench for knowledge. I want us to know better. Read, listen to podcasts, watch the TEDx presentations. Just have this thirst and hunger to know. And then once you gain that knowledge, now I want you to do better. You're going to do better with the new knowledge that you have. I'm at a point now where I'm reading a book like every 2 weeks. It used to be one book a month, but you just get into that pattern because I just have a thirst for knowledge. Helps me to do better, and then ultimately, when it's all said and done, now we will lead better. So it starts with this thirst for knowledge, know better, and then the call to action is now based upon what you do know, do better, and then the actual result of all of that will be to lead better. That's what I would like to leave with your listeners, Tom. And I think it's a great concept. It's connected to what we do each and every day. And all the evidence is there that says that it's working.
That is extremely rich. That's a great way to close us out. Kevin, I really appreciate you joining me today. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and look forward to digging more into your information.
All right, Tom. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Keep doing great work. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Know better, do better, lead better. That's the challenge Kevin left with us today, and it's one worth sitting with. Whether it's the reminder that servant leadership isn't soft leadership, it's strategic, or the reality that one training session doesn't change a culture, only consistent, accountable follow-through does. Or simply that people need to know you care before they'll follow where you lead. These are truths worth carrying into your next conversation, your next meeting, your next moment of leadership. To connect with Kevin and learn more about the Johnson Leadership Group, visit thejohnsonleadershipgroup.com. There's even an option for a complimentary coaching session if you want to experience his work firsthand. All the details are in the show notes. If this episode added value, please share it with a leader in your world who needs to hear it. And remember to like and subscribe. And until next time, keep leading with more.